Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to a video about crime. And I mean in novels, of course, because December is, among many other things, Vlogmas, and there's Christmas, I think, coming up, but it's also Cloak-and-Dagger-month, in which, you are supposed to read crime fiction. It's kind of Mystery Madness March. Is that the right title? But then in December, and Cloak and Dagger. I don't know whether you are participating in Cloak and Dagger. I don't think there is a rules or any prompt or anything, but I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to talk about crime fiction. I really enjoy reading crime fiction, and of course in a video I can't talk about all the various forms of crime fiction, but I can talk a little bit about what I like, what I don't like, and maybe if you are new into crime fiction or want to explore this genre more, this video might be helpful, or at least it might be entertaining. So the first kind of subgenre that I want to talk about that I really enjoy is that's one of the fundamentals of fundamental subgenres of crime, and that is the police procedural. I'm reading one now, Elizabeth George, with No One as Witness. This is number 13 in the Inspector Lynley's mystery, and I'm reading this with Heidi from my reading life, and we are slowly making our way through the series. Currently there have been 22 books published, and I think next year in September is supposed to the publication date of number 23. So a police procedural, very not difficult to describe, is when a police is at the center of the book, plus a crime, of course. So you have mostly one or two central police persons, not a whole squad, but it centers often around one or two people, and they will solve a crime, and 95% of the time that crime is a murder. You have books, police procedurals with other types of crime, missing persons, rape, sometimes even financial, like fraud or other type of financial crimes. But the most common crime in a police procedural is a murder or multiple murders. And then you have your policewoman, your policeman, or oftentimes it's a couple, and they will solve the crime. What I like when it comes to police procedural is when it's very much character focused, which means that the police woman, the policeman at the center of the book, it is not, kind of a stereotypical police person, but there is character development in the book. And of course, that's easier if it's a series, because then you have time to develop the character if you choose. I will come back to that in a minute. But I like it when it's really character focused. I don't like the police guy, woman being, your typical, divorced, middle-aged policeman who is drinking too much. I think that's boring. So I like when it's character driven and when the author really does pay attention and to, flesh out the characters. I just said character development, which is often in a series like this one, is following the main character, Inspector Lynley, and his assistant, Barbara Havers, throughout the books, and their relationship develops, plus they also develop as characters. That's not always necessarily the case. Especially in the more old-fashioned Agatha Christie cozy mysteries. By the way, cozy means there is not too much violence except for the murder and no explicit sex. Then it's called cozy. So Miss Marple, for instance, this cozy mystery, or the Poirot a series is cozy. But those characters are fixed in time. So you have two types of series when it comes to these police procedurals, and Miss Marple is not a policewoman, but it's kind of a subgenre of the subgenre. It's your sleuth, private detective, or somebody who just solves crimes and is not affiliated with the police. But two main kind of ways of doing it is either you fix the character in time. So when you read Poirot, there might be character development within the book, but he's not aging. There's nothing going on. Miss Marple, the same. This one, you really go, the character is a year older, 2 years older, 3 years older. Sometimes they make a leap. So there is definitely development in the character. Donna Leon's books about the Venice inspector, Brunetti, the same thing. You meet him when he is younger and then he develops and you read about his marriage. So I like it when they develop, especially when it's a series. I'm bored when they stay fixed in time and place, so to speak. So police procedurals, I love them when they are character focused, when the author doesn't just fill in, the form for a police procedural, but actually does more to flesh it out and develop it. With the series, the issue is, especially with a long series like this and character development, you have to start with book one. The first book in this series was published in 1988. So a lot of it is dated when it comes to technology, when it comes to, mobile phones even. But if the character is developing through time, it doesn't make sense to just start at some point because you will miss all the background. I mean, Elizabeth George does a pretty good job you are able to read this book without having read the rest. But you're missing a lot of details and a lot of details that give it more weight and more, flesh on the bone, so to speak. That's the advantage of a sleuth like Miss Marple or Poirot, because they don't change. So you can just read any book in the series and not miss much. I mean, you might miss a friendship that she developed 3 books earlier or something, but that's not really that important. So I like the series, and we started with the first book, but it is kind of a commitment if you have missed the first 22 books and have to start with book one. So maybe choose a series that is, not that long. You have Tana French, the Irish crime writer. She wrote the Dublin Murder Squad series. I think that's 5 or 6 books, and each book has a different police person of this squad at the center. And you have this is 2 books so far, The Searcher and The Hunter, I think is the next one, and that's Cal Hooper at the center. So if you are interested in development but don't want to commit to a series that is 22 years old, you can pick series that don't have that many books yet. Another big subgenre is psychological thrillers. Nicci French. It's a couple, Nicky Gerard and forgot his first name, French, her husband, they write these psychological thrillers. That means the suspense comes from you being really afraid for the main character that often a woman will be killed or abducted and raped and tortured. The suspense comes not from the police trying to find the murderer, but the police is trying to prevent a crime and, save a victim. And it's all about the psychological anxiety and suspense and terror. I'm not a huge fan of the psychological thriller, especially these are way too anxiety inducing for me. But if you like that type, but don't want to, like me, and don't want to be too much involved into this very anxiety inducing kind of thing, then I can recommend Patricia Highsmith, one of the grand dames of crime, and she wrote mostly psychological thrillers. Talented Mr. Ripley, you might know, maybe also watched the film. So even though this is also about psychological terror, quote unquote, it is, I don't want to say more cozy, but it is not, the violence is not as much in your face. It's still pretty bad, but it's a little bit more subdued, and that's more my thing. Then what I also really enjoy are crime novels, whether it's a police procedural or a private detective or an amateur sleuth like Miss Marple is when there is a real important sense of place. And one of, I think, in contemporary crime fiction, one of the author that does that really, really well is Attica Locke. Bluebird is also the first in a series. I think it's called Highway 39 or 59 or something. 59, Highway 59. So it's centering also around one particular sleuth. But what these books have that not all police procedurals have or need to have is this couldn't happen anywhere else than it does. It's the same with Donna Leon. Venice is one of the main characters of her books. Or Jane Harper, the Australian outback is a thing in her novels. And I'm not saying that this is in London, mostly set in London. She has a very good geographical sense, and she gives you this idea of when they drive through London. But it could also be in Edinburgh or Manchester. These books can't, and the Donna Leon books, Brunetti series can't, and Jane Harper's books can't. They are very much bound to a certain place, anchored at a certain place, and I definitely enjoy that because it is giving an extra dimension, so to speak, to the crime and the people who solve the crime, the police or the people who live there. And it's the heat, for instance, also in Jane Harper, it's always hot, but also the community, the way of life, the way people live is a very important part of the books. Then you also have, if you are more into historical fiction, for instance, there are plenty of crime books that are set in the past. And I don't mean Agatha Christie. Of course, she's set in the past from our point of view. But when she wrote it, it was set in present times. But I mean real historical fiction, like this one. This is a mystery set in the 1920s in India, The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sujata, excuse me, Massey. And this is about, it's also part of a series, and it's one woman, I have to see that, Perveen Mistry, Mistry, I think it's funny that she calls her that because it's like mystery. Anyway, never mind. Who wants to be a detective, and but it's 1920s India. So if you enjoy that type of colorful background that is different and is not set in present day, you can find plenty of those. Whether they are set in India, or in the 1920s in Berlin. Have a look, Google it. If historical fiction is your thing and you want to try to find crime fiction that suits your specific taste, you will definitely find enough to read. And then finally, I sometimes encounter people who are really very much focused on literary fiction. They don't want to start in the genre fiction type, because we have to say that a genre fiction is kind of formulaic. That I don't mean that in a negative way. It's supposed to be, because as a reader you have certain expectations when you read crime fiction as a genre, and they better do what you expect them to do. If that is not at all your thing, there is still plenty of literary fiction that deals with crime. I just have one here, a translated work that I recently read, Stolen by Ann-Helén Laestadius, translated from the Swedish by Rachel Wilson Broyles. This was published 2 or 3 years ago, and it's set in the Sami community in Sweden, and it starts with a young girl witnessing a crime. It's not a murder, or at least not the murder of a human, but she witnesses a crime, and then the story takes off from there, how that impacts a family. There's also a brother who has difficulties. So the crime is more the trigger of the story, and not so much the center that the story, that gives us the wrong impression, because of course it's at the center when it's the trigger. But the author then tries to give a more, how the character deals with the crime. It's not about solving the crime necessarily, not at all. Another good example is Blackwater by Joyce Carol Oates, which is about a true crime story. A woman drowned, Teddy Kennedy, that's all I'm going to say. And it is about this woman's story, but there is a crime. Without the drowning and Teddy Kennedy fleeing the scene, there would not be a book. So you can find really many literary fiction authors who would take a crime. Mosfegh, Otessa Mosfegh, her book Eileen is about a crime. So if you don't like the genre aspect of crime, try crime in literary fiction. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, this is my kind of hot take on some of the books that we call crime fiction. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments very much, and I'll see you all soon in the next one, next Sunday.